Cheers, everybody. It is Sunday, and we are live for another episode of the Cole Memo. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the latest in Texas cannabis policy, including the expansion of the Compassionate Use Program, also known as TCUP. And I think the big portion of the show may be dedicated to the failed effort to ban the sale and possession of federally legal cannabis products in the Lone Star State. So since we are live, feel free to drop your comments below. We might even take callers if time permits later on in the show. If you're catching this after the fact and don't want to miss the next one, subscribe to our YouTube channel at colememo.com/YouTube. Saddle up your horses. This is going to be another hot episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo is what allows this whole thing to go on.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening and watching the Cole Memo.
Austin, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Doing pretty good, man. It's always a pleasure to be here. Gotta say, I think you have one of the raddest openings to a podcast that's out there, especially cannabis focused. So always happy to come on and talk shop with the best of Illinois.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And just in case people have missed our last shows, I'll try to link them in the show notes for people that want to check them out. But Austin, can you give yourself an intro? Tell us, who you are and who you work with in Texas.
Sure. My name is Austin Zamhari. I'm the executive director of the Texas Cannabis Collective. We're a volunteer nonprofit based here in the state of Texas. Really, our whole group is all across the state. El Paso, the Texas Triangle, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, DFW. And so, yeah, we work a lot on cannabis reform throughout the state. Really, we do a lot of breaking news material because we have our thumb on the heartbeat of what's happening in the state. And so we do a lot of advocacy work in session at the legislature, outside of the session at the local level. We were part of the team that helped Ground Game Texas and other organizations locally decriminalize up to 4 ounces of marijuana possession in 9 different jurisdictions. So, we're really proud of the work. We're really focused on penalty reduction at the legislature, but we also, want to see cannabis transition from 110 years of strict marijuana prohibition to legitimate regulations and enforcement, and just getting past this time in our period of history where it's still very backwards, more like 1920 than 2020.
Yeah, straight up. Well, before we get into what I said, I think is going to be like more of the hot part of the episode. Can you briefly describe to us the expansion in the Texas Compassionate Use Program? Like what is the expansion? They call it an expansion, so you've got that boots on the ground perspective. So
yeah. In fact, it is quite a bit of an expansion compared to the measures that have passed in previous sessions, right? So Texas Compassionate Use Program is the medical marijuana. It's very, very low dose THC. It's practically CBD oil in its conception back in 2015. And it took about 3 years before the first licensees were online, ready to distribute this medicine. Very, very highly focused. It's overrun by
only 3 licensees, right? Sorry to cut you off, but that's just crazy.
Yeah. The law allowed up to 12, but DPS had only held it to 3, and they've maintained that number for 10 years now. So, but what the expansion does is it adds 12 new licensees, 9 that are set to be distributed in December, and then another 3 that are going to be distributed on April of 2026. So that is good. There's going to be some more, and they're regionally focused, right? So you're going to have to put them in different regions. We don't quite know what that means yet, as DPS hasn't really set out guidelines. And so we anticipate there's going to be like, 8, 9, 10, 11 different health regions throughout the state, somewhere in that area. And these new licensees will be strategically located within those regions to better serve the entirety of the state of Texas. Because even in DPS's own words, the 10 years of compassionate use has failed to serve the entirety of the state of Texas. And so that is probably one of the biggest. It also allows for satellite locations. If right now, Texas Original probably has the most robust satellite program in the state. However, there are still places that they're not even able to get stationed at. And so previously you were only able to store medicine 24 hours at the main location of where you were making the product, right? And they're all centrally, Goodblin, Texas Original, both centrally located in Austin. So you can imagine how hard it is to get to a place like El Paso or the Panhandle or the RGV. Some of these places are like 8-hour plus away, right? And you can't store medicine overnight. So it's literally, you have to go there, hook up, and go back. So now this new satellite will allow, that language will allow for these companies to have these locations where they can store these products. So it will make accessibility a lot better. And then it also added qualifying conditions. The biggest one is chronic pain. That one we will see, I think, a lot of people who are ready to jump in. PTSD was already a qualifying condition, which a lot of people were getting in through PTSD, but now with chronic pain and PTSD, I think you're going to really encapsulate the entirety of Texas patients just on those two diagnoses alone. I think it added Crohn's. It added palliative care. So those were kind of like the big ones. And then it also allowed for new products, patches, suppositories, and pulmonary inhalation devices is the term that we're using. So it's likely going to be vapes, inhalers, nebulizers, things of that nature, which is actually kind of interesting because the state also passed a law that bans essentially all vaporizers in the state of Texas, with the exception of a couple of like big nicotine brands. So as of September 1st, all hemp-derived, vaporizers are no longer going to be allowed to be sold in the state of Texas. Mm-hmm. So even though, SB3 failed, they still did get something in there to kind of tackle part of the market. And, I think that we're going to see, with that being shut down, we're going to be seeing, I think, people getting into the compassionate use program specifically for that concentrated vaporization aspect.
Gotcha.
And I think that's everything. I mean, there may be a couple other like nuanced items in there, but those are the big key points of what passed in HB 46. That was by State Affairs Chairman Ken King.
Gotcha. And we'll get to the hemp topic, because again, that one's the fun one. But really quick on the chronic pain, is it still, I feel like I read somewhere that like in order to qualify for chronic pain in the Teacup program, that you would have to have like evidence or a prescription of a painkiller. I don't think that's how it was worded, but is that still true?
Yeah, some of the original language. Listen, getting this through the Senate, the House did a fantastic job of, and Ken King, I think, did a fantastic job of really leading the medical cannabis bill. It faced zero resistance in the House. Everybody was pretty much on board. Like, yeah, we want to expand medical cannabis. It was a bipartisan authored bill. It had obviously Ken King as the author, but it had Tom Oliverson, who's the lieutenant governor's neighbor, and we all know him for a special amendment that went into SB3. But Tom Oliverson had Rep. Mihaela Place out of Plano, who is a very, very progressive member, very friendly to cannabis, and Representative Joe Moody out of El Paso, who, if you're new to Texas, he's been one of our strongest champions for cannabis reform in the state of Texas. So, it was very bipartisan bill, very robust. Actually had a lot more. It allowed any member of any veteran with any military disability rating from 1% to 100%, didn't matter what it was, to automatically qualify. And ironically enough, they stripped that in the Senate on Memorial Day. So it was a Memorial Day weekend, right? So like it's just like kind of incredible. They tried to not allow chronic pain. That was a big uproar. They added chronic pain back in, but then they said, oh, you had to have taken an opioid for 90 days. So that's the language you were specifically mentioning. That ended up getting stripped out once they got to conference committee. And again, I really have to give kudos to King because that man stood his ground and used his leverage of the situation of what was happening with hemp, what has been happening with compassionate use, and stood firm on fighting for the most robust expansion that we've seen to date. I'm not going to call it the most robust in the country because it's not. It's still one of the most restrictive programs in the country and likely won't be viable for the entirety of the state of Texas for at least 9 to 12 months. But kudos to King for what he did on the compassionate use side. And also, I think we can talk about him in regards to SB3 as we move into that conversation.
Absolutely. And maybe that's a good transition here. Let's play this small clip from Teacup, and then I've got another clip that might set the stage for our conversation. But with regard to Teacup, I think this clip works as a perfect transition.
The Teacup program. He signed that bill. That's worthless now. Here we passed maybe the best Teacup program, Texas for compassionate use, to address those with PTSD, cancer, Crohn's disease. We added. Who's going to go there now when they can go to any smoke shop and get what they want? That's why no one grew their licenses before.
I think that's really interesting hearing the quiet part out loud when he just acknowledges, well, why would they go there if they can get whatever they want at their local smoke shop? It's like, exactly.
Every time I see that clip, it just also goes to show how uneducated and ignorant the lieutenant governor is on what compassionate use has been and what it is. Cancer and PTSD have long existed in at least 4 years in compassionate use. So, they're changing laws and they don't know the rhetoric associated with what's going on in that community. And they don't understand the laws that it seemed like they passed in 2019. It doesn't seem like they understand exactly what compassionate use has been and how poorly it has been mismanaged by the state, and why Texans are incredibly skeptical of entering into a compassionate use program that we have 10 years of documented evidence of how poor and inefficient this program has been. And that is at the hands of the lawmakers and on the enforcement side from DPS. And that goes all the way up to the top, to the governor. So, let that transition us now into SB3.
Yeah, let's talk about SB3, and I think this clip does a good job of setting the stage here. I tried to make a little compilation of clips. Here we go.
Good Sunday morning to you. Hope you are having a great weekend. We begin with Governor Greg Abbott's down-to-the-wire veto of Senate Bill 3, the ban on THC products in Texas.
Governor Greg Abbott is now calling for a special session for July. That announcement came after the governor vetoed a bill that would ban products with THC.
He rejected the bill after 11:22 p.m. last Sunday, less than 40 minutes before the midnight deadline. Abbott said he vetoed the measure because of legal concerns, saying, quote, "If I were to allow Senate Bill 3 to become law, its enforcement would be enjoined for years, leaving existing abuses unaddressed. Texas cannot afford to wait." knowing that it faces a lengthy battle that will render it dead on arrival in court would hinder rather than help us solve the public safety issues the bill seeks to contain. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who pushed for this bill during the regular session, didn't hold back about the governor's veto.
One can only come to this conclusion, which surprises me. The governor of the state of Texas wants to legalize recreational marijuana in Texas.
Now, the governor's press secretary responded with a statement that said in part, quote, Governor Abbott has always shared the lieutenant governor's desire to ensure that THC products are not sold to our children and that the dangerous synthetic drugs that we have seen recently are banned. In his veto proclamation, the governor cited a similar Arkansas law that was challenged in the courts and had been held up. But last week, a federal appeals court overturned a lower court's ruling that blocked that law from taking effect. In a post on the social media platform X, the lieutenant governor cited the ruling, saying, quote, all we have to do is pass SB 3 just like we passed during the regular session. The governor responded on X saying, quote, even though the Arkansas law was not plagued with the same legal defects as the Texas bill, it still was unenforced for 2 years and will be further tied up in court for years to come. Only 2 Republicans in the House voted against the ban on THC products, and I spoke with one of them, Representative Brian Harrison.
I believe I was the only elected Republican in the legislature to call on the governor to veto SB 3, and I did that 3 weeks ago. So I don't think, I certainly had no heads up what he was going to do or not do, but it was unfortunate that the legislature passed a bill that, in my opinion, was massively government overreach. It was marching us in the direction of California-style nanny statism, and it was going to force adults to make a very horrible choice. I mean, these are patriotic, freedom-loving Texans who either want or relied on many of these products into either the very dangerous, deadly black market or to much more highly addictive pharmaceuticals. So it was a bill that needed to be vetoed.
I mean, why did all the other Republicans go for it, do you think? And why were you so? Because this, according to what they say, the supporters of this, is a dangerous products and that it can hurt Texans.
Well, we have lots of ways of dealing with lots of dangerous products right now. I mean, we deal with alcohol and we deal with tobacco, which kill far more people than these hemp products. I can recognize a bill that goes way too far. I will never let the state of Texas become a nanny state, and that's why I was proud to oppose it.
Right now, it seems like their 2 positions are irreconcilable. Dan Patrick said he is dead set against nothing short of a total ban on THC products, which is what the legislature did pass and the governor vetoed. And the governor has asked the legislature during the special session to come up with something that he believes will pass legal muster and that will address some of the issues that I think a lot of people understand across the spectrum are a problem. For example, there are no restrictions, age limits, or age restrictions on buying.
Well, let me make this point. I agree with the goal, the purported goal of SB 3, which is to protect children from potentially dangerous products. Of course, that's a goal that I share, and I share it strongly. And I think if we want to treat this stuff maybe perhaps more similarly to the way we deal with alcohol and tobacco with certain age restrictions, that's something that I would be welcome a discussion about, but SB 3 just went too far.
What do you think is going to happen?
So he essentially wants regulation of these hemp-based THC products, and it's unclear what the legislature can do in terms of a compromise.
Oh, so that I think that pretty well lays it out. One thing that I think they didn't mention that you might be able to color in, and even Dan Patrick mentioned, just a short clip.
In fact, on SB 3, between the 2 chambers, there are 108 Republicans, and I think the count is 105 voted for SB 3.
Didn't he have something that was like, if you don't vote for SB 3, then we aren't doing this, and that's why all those I mean, am I wrong in remembering that, or you got the boots on the ground? So,
well, the story changes from person to person, depends on who you talk to. There have been members who have now come out and said there was an ultimatum. It was Drew Darby. We've had Rep. Curry, who said, we were trying to get some stuff passed, but we didn't really know what was going on. Jay Dean is another conservative rep who said that they were down to the wire and they really needed legislation to pass. And this is not an uncommon tactic for the lieutenant governor. He's done it in multiple sessions. So this is a strategy that we know is very commonplace for his behavior. So, I've heard some people say that they've talked to members and said, no, these members said there was no ultimatum. Which could be fair as well. But we all knew what was going on. The suspicion is that they were holding teacher pay raises, among other solid legislation, hostage to get SB3 passed. And it wasn't necessarily getting SB3 passed. It was getting SB3 passed with the Oliver Amendment that reverted it back to the total ban. The House had done a very thoughtful job of putting in solid regulations. And I believe it on the House floor, outside of the Oliver Amendment had not kind of usurped everything. There were some other solid amendments that were about to come down that I think would have gotten favorable votes that would have even more legitimized a solid opportunity at regulating the hemp market and that preserved a lot of the market space. But again, it got reverted back. The rest is kind of history. Most everybody voted for it. In fact, Brian Harrison, let me mention this guy. I appreciate Brian Harrison for being absolutely almost alone in standing out and being vocal about this.
Was that the guy in the clip that was kind of speaking out?
This was a very unexpected ally. He had not been vocal about SB3 at all prior to his vote. And we kind of been joking around that, Brian Harrison, he's not a very well liked by the legislature because he has done a lot of controversial things, constantly calling people out, constantly doing, Twitter stuff. A lot of people say that he's only trying to get clicks and things to that nature. But when he found out how popular the vote no on SB3 was, especially among the conservative base here in Texas, he latched onto that pretty quickly and had ever since been more and more vocal about it. And even now is still very vocal. And I will absolutely say he is correct in that he was the only elected Republican in the state of Texas that vocally opposed SB3 and called for the governor to veto it. So, kudos to Brian Harrison as well. And we look forward to having him as a strong ally going into the special session, because I think he's going to make even more noise about it, which is great.
Yeah, cool. Well, I want to try to run through a few other clips and get your thoughts on them. I know I want to be mindful of our time. I know we got about a little bit over 10 minutes maybe left. Just a few clips that really stood out to me. This first one sort of already was played in that news clip, but let's play it.
In reading the proclamation, one can only come to this conclusion, which surprises me. The governor of the state of Texas wants to legalize recreational marijuana in Texas. That's the headline, folks, because that's what his proclamation does. Now, whether it's unintentional and he didn't think through it, or whether it's intentional, that's the result of the veto. Who are we as a state? We think we're going to attract business here if we got a bunch of people high on marijuana at very high levels? Is that who wants to come here and build their plant here, open up a business, move their family here? We're not Colorado, and we're not Oregon, and we're not Washington State. We're Texas. And I will not sign a bill that legalizes marijuana in Texas. I'm not mad at the governor. But I'm not going to legalize marijuana in Texas. And if people want to vote me out of office for that, so be it. Not going to do it.
So this clip that I'm about to play, I would love some of your thoughts on, because this one really gets to the core of SB3, and it just makes me question. Well, let's watch the clip.
And make no mistake, what they're selling is illegal today. Look, the polling from the other side has done a great job of manufacturing all kinds of people to fight for their illegal business. I'm telling you again, folks, everything, or virtually everything they're selling in these shops is illegal today. If I can get a couple of state troopers and go down to a store today, we will find illegal products.
So if it's all illegal today, why do we need SB3? You with me, Austin? Oh, I don't know if I lost you here. Can you hear me? I don't know. I think I may have lost you. Give me a thumbs up. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. I think you're with me now. Why do we need SB3 if it's all illegal today?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. That's the conundrum, right? Like, that exactly. Why do we need SB3 if everything in there is illegal already? So the lieutenant governor is just, he literally cannot talk about this without lying. And so, you heard it very clearly from him. He's not going to sign anything. He's not going to budge from SB3. We're going to go into a special session in July 21st. The House is going to work really hard, have a public hearing, and they're going to come out with some thoughtful regulations that are palatable to the governor. And it's going to go to the Senate, and they're going to just make it a circus and shut it down. And so I'm very confident that we are going to go to special session, and the lieutenant governor is only going to dig in deeper. I mean, he's already, you heard him there wasn't a clip that, I don't think you played the clip that said, if this is something that Texans are ready to unelect him for, so be it. And so this is a hill he's willing to die on, and this isn't going away. Obviously, we're about to get it even more hyped up going into July and August. So, and then on the other side of that, we're really going to start seeing campaigns light up for primary season. So, and he's not going to stop talking about it. He's going to, this fog will hang over the politics in Texas all the way through primaries and all the way to the general election. So there's my anticipation, my professional opinion, we go to special session and nothing happens. And the lieutenant, the spat between you already played the clip, the spat between the lieutenant governor and the governor is very public. They are on very different sides. And I would say that that the governor is very conservative on this issue. He probably doesn't want to see, anything that resembles legalized recreational marijuana. However, he understands the nuance. The lieutenant governor is not a lawyer. He even says that in the press conference, whereas Governor Greg Abbott is a former Texas Supreme Court justice. He was attorney general for a decade in Texas. So I'm going to listen to the guy who's got a very rich legal background over the guy who literally spews lies and brings in people who continue to feed that narrative. So I don't think anything's going to change, man. I think that unfortunately, the status quo will likely remain. And who knows, the governor could call another special session for him, THC. But I'm already telling you right now, nobody wants to go there for this. Nobody. Nobody wanted to do this in the regular session. So legislators are even less interested in going to the special session and having a fight with Dan Patrick over this. So I don't think he definitely doesn't have the leverage he had in regular. In this special session, we can anticipate him to go scorched earth, and hopefully we have legislators who are willing to stand their ground, because this will be a major election issue in Texas going into the primaries and into the general next year.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find it now. Unfortunately, I can't. But folks can look this up. In Governor Abbott's veto, I thought it was very interesting that he basically gave some suggestions. Like he was like, "All right,
Yeah.
if you're gonna do this," and it just very much does seem like a ban is out of the question, and really what you're all moving towards is regulation, which is, I think, you know, yeah, it is what it is. So, there was one thing that he said during that press conference that I loved, that I hope you guys hold on to this clip and bring it back up when this subject inevitably comes up. Here's a short 20-second clip. I've been waiting for an elected representative in all states that have some form of legal cannabis to say exactly this. And thank you, Dan Patrick, for saying this.
He says, we will regulate it, that you are limited to your purchases. You can only buy so many products. Wait for that lawsuit from someone. Are we going to start limiting, how many bottles of Jack Daniels you can buy, or how many six-packs you can buy? None of his proclamation makes sense to me.
I agree that purchase and possession limits do not make sense. So I guess when that comes around, Mr. Dan Patrick, we'll remember that. So yeah, this is just it's been a really interesting thing to watch. And I thought this clip from, I believe, another representative who opposed SB3 was interesting. I think it basically explains what you were saying earlier.
Do you think anything less than a total ban is going to pass the Senate?
I don't know. And that's up to Lieutenant Governor. And, I can tell him what the reality is. I can tell him what the science is. I can tell him what the data is, but I can't help him understand it. And if we keep electing officials who simply cannot or will not understand reality, we have to deal with that at the ballot box.
Pretty powerful statement there.
Yeah, Representative Wu has always been a good friend to the cannabis scene. He's out of Houston. Like, come on, man. Like, you ever been to Houston? Like, it's the fourth biggest city in the country. I mean, it's like Chicago. It's like LA. It's like, Phoenix. All of these massive big cities. It's the only one that doesn't have legalized marijuana, but you wouldn't know if if you went to Houston. So it, Rep. Wu, really appreciate him. Yeah, he actually spoke out on, I believe, the Oliverson Amendment. And, it's funny because politics is a weird thing when you have guys like Gene Wu, who's probably one of the far, leaders of progressive politics in Texas, and guys like Brian Harrison, who are on the far right side of progressive politics, literally agreeing on the same exact thing.
Right.
And so, in one thing that I really want to make, before we cut off, one thing I really want to make mention to is that the opposition to, or the pro voice for SB3 was mostly law enforcement, some of the alcohol establishment, distributors, beer. So that one was even kind of divided as well. And then, just some of these organizations that have habitually been against any kind of cannabis advancement, like Sam and some of the others. Whereas
don't forget some marijuana investors, people.
Yeah,
that
a lot of
invest,
yes, yeah, right. of course, right.
Which is
what a lot to throw your your support into, right? Whereas on our side, we had 1.5 million veterans under the banner of the VFW who opposed SB3. We had sports figures like Al Harrington and Ricky Williams, who both have national cannabis brands, who vocally came out and were opposed to SB3. We had major Republicans like Tony Busby, who defended Ken Paxton in his impeachment trial, who was against SB3. We had people even like Paige Figi from Charlotte's Web, the mother of Charlotte Figi, who was the inspiration for Charlotte's Web CBD, right? Came all the way to Texas to encourage lawmakers to vote no on SB3. So those are the people that were on our side. Of course, you had pretty much everybody in the state of Texas. Like poll after poll after poll, showed that this was unpopular, even in the conservative circles. We had a bunch of like talk radio, like right-wing talk radio guys on our side, which is it was very clear how bad this bill was. And people want to talk about intoxicating cannabinoids. They were after the non-intoxicating compounds as well: CBN, CBC, THCV. All of these other compounds that don't have that psychotropic effect. Was that the right term? Psychotropic, euphoric effect, right? Yeah. Then yeah, like all of that stuff was going to be illegal, and it was really going to impact even the hemp farmers. So it was a bad bill. It got clearly the governor saw the legal issues from it. And we're hoping that message stays the same going into the special, because I think we're only going to get a kind of a repeat from Dan Patrick. It's SB3 2.0, if you will.
Yeah, well, for all those reasons, it's going to be interesting to see how Texas moves forward. I'll definitely be watching. I'll definitely keep in touch. Look, I know we're at the top of our time, so I'll definitely let you head out. Sounds like you're going to be hitting the pool. Sounds like I will be too, or I can tell you I will be. So I just want to thank you for your time today. And like I say, I'll be watching, and just let me know if you want to come back on and talk about what's going on in Texas. I do enjoy it. So
let's plan because I will be at the special session, probably opening day, which is July 21st, Monday, July 21st. The special session is slated for a full month. They don't typically go for a full month. They usually, because it's so narrow and focused, that they only go for about like a week or two. And so I plan on being there. So maybe next time we join up, I can do it live from the Texas Capitol.
That'd be cool. Have a special session at the special session.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. Cool, man. Well, I'll let you go. I'm gonna maybe you catch the show after the fact. I'm gonna play a few other clips before I close out the show, but I won't hold you for that. So you enjoy the sun and the pool, and I'll be joining you in spirit here in a moment. So
peace, Cole. Love you guys.
Yep. See you, man. Bye. All right, folks. Well, hope you enjoyed that conversation with Austin. I definitely did. I wanted to play a few more clips that caught my attention from that press conference. And I'll be sure to add the link to the press conference after the fact. I'll add a link to the press conference, the veto, and perhaps even some of the other clips that we've showcased today, if I can remember to do that. Let's watch some of the people that Dan Patrick say are involved in this industry, the hemp industry.
Here's the other thing. We have no idea who's making this product. Are they terrorists? Is this a terrorist money laundering scheme in Texas? Is it a cartel money laundering scheme? Someone told me I better watch my step. That's what someone told me. I better watch my step. Because this whole idea by the industry again saying, well, these are mom and pop businesses. No, they're not. There may be a few. This is all orchestrated. As I said, over 3 or 4 years, 8,000 to 9,000 shops open up. They all look the same. They all have the same products. They all have the same footprint. They're all built in the same spot around schools, or most of them. No, that wasn't a coincidence, Rudy. That's organized crime behind it. Very likely.
All right, that was definitely an interesting one. This clip also caught my attention. Once again, folks, we are live, so if you have thoughts about some of the things that we are saying, some of the things that are said in this clip, please drop them below, and I can display the comment on screen and perhaps even respond to it if I have thoughts about it. Let's watch this clip. This is about life and death, according to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
I mean, what kind of state do we want? What kind of culture do we want? Do we want everybody high? I mean, everyone will tell you in those other 3 states, work product is going down. Everywhere you go, it smells like grass. It's awful. The last time I went to Colorado, I didn't want to go back anymore. I don't want that for Texas. You know, gaming and sports betting, that's a people's choice, whatever they want to do. If that happens, it happens. But this is life and death. This is life and death, Rudy. This destroys lives. This reaches a whole nother level.
And this next clip will showcase something that I wish I would have asked Austin before he went. Basically, the governor was asked, you know, if what could come out of this special session that's coming forth. And this is a question we can obviously circle back on with Austin, but I think it's interesting to hear Lieutenant Governor's perspective on what the future could hold if this session doesn't go his way.
He now wants to make it legal. By this veto, he has now put us in a box. If we do nothing, the status quo continues for the next 2.5 years, 3 years, to the next session until you can pass a law, which would be devastating to families, or we have to capitulate and vote for the lesser of 2 really bad evils. So that's the box we're in. We will work through it, hopefully, but you know, people can say what they want. It's not the state I want. I don't want my kids and my grandkids growing up where everybody's high. And because his bill, what his bill says, his proclamation, that this will be the high-level THC, because according to him, now that that's already happened, he quotes a case in there that you can't go back and take that back because that would be unfair, in essence. They've already built a business. They're already selling this terrible stuff. So we can't go back and take it from them. It's illegal. Yes, we can.
All right, folks. If you'd like to call into the show, colememo.com/live. You don't have to show your face. You can call into the show and share your comments. If you haven't already, please hit that like button and subscribe and comment below. We can display your comment on screen. We've had some comments roll in. Genetic Memory Farms, thank you for tuning in, says Dan Patrick will be able to use this to take a run at governor, and I bet he makes quite a bit of political hay from it. They have a supermajority, and that means he needs a way to stand out. Genetic Memory Farms continues by saying this could be the political sunshine he needs to make hay. Yeah, you know, it will be interesting. I obviously am not from Texas, but when I read these polls out of Texas, it does sound like this is largely unpopular with Republicans, which is surprising. And again, you know, as we discussed earlier, there's speculation that the reason that so many Republican representatives did vote for this is because basically it was said, and again, as Austin said, he knows better than I. It sounds like there's speculation all over the map, but what I've read online is that it was said basically, if you don't vote to pass SB3, we will not be voting for, I think it was like teachers' pay, and maybe perhaps a variety of other issues. Though, again, this is just what I read online. You it is the grapevine, if you will. So it comes with that. That's not in no way certain, but it is interesting to hear that Austin, who does have his boots on the ground, has heard similar things. Again, folks, what do you think about what's going on in Texas? Because in the state of Illinois, when we're talking about banning hemp, it's usually under the lens of, well, this is undercutting the licensees that are in the state legal marijuana program. And in case you didn't know, I'm using marijuana as a legal term of art. I typically call the plant cannabis because that is its scientific name, but there are two legal terms of art. Marijuana, which is any cannabis that's above 0.3% THC, Delta 9 THC, and hemp, which is any cannabis below 0.3% Delta 9 THC by dry weight. In other words, there are just two arbitrary legal definitions of cannabis. And one of the ways I use to explain this is this graphic that I'll throw on my screen right now, which was created by a comic artist, Brian Box Brown. And it basically shows this gummy. And if, only 0.3% of that gummy has THC, well, then it is hemp. And I'm saying that in air quotes. If it has more than 0.3% THC, in other words, if the THC exceeds 0.3% of the entire gummy, then it is marijuana. And I say that in air quotes. This is all cannabis. These are just two arbitrary legal distinctions. To use a practical example, you've got this soda here, which has 50 milligrams of THC, which I always like to say, some of you might be saying, wow, that's a large amount of THC. Well, it's still only 0.3% of what is in this entire can. And by the way, you can buy this product now at drinkcantrip.com/colememo. If you use that link, drinkcantrip.com/colememo, you'll get a 15% discount. I'll get 15% in-store credit, which I will use to buy more of these drinks. You can get them shipped to your door in most states because, again, this is hemp. This is federally legal cannabis, in other words. And so that's why you're able to purchase as much as you want, get it shipped directly to your door, buy it at your local store. I think if you go to drinkcantrip.com, you can find where it's stocked at local stores near you. And that's why these are arbitrary legal terms of art. And like I say, I usually use this graphic to try to help illustrate what I'm talking about, because when you start throwing around numbers like 0.3%, at least for myself, if I don't have this is what really made it click for me. This is what really helped me to understand what's going on here and how these products are essentially legal, which is, like I say, super interesting. If I didn't mention already, Brian Box Brown, I know I mentioned he's a comic artist, but you can find his work at boxbrown.com. I wanted to play another clip off of YouTube here, so hopefully they don't hit us with an ad. They love to do that. Let's watch this clip. This is a state representative who voted to ban THC in Texas, but then went to one of these dispensaries in Texas, a hemp dispensary, if you will. Let's watch the clip.
Getting a first-hand look. That's what happened today when a Texas lawmaker made his first visit to a Waco business that sells THC. This comes just a few days after Governor Abbott vetoed a bill banning THC statewide.
Now the matter will be the focus of a special session. Today, one local representative took it upon himself to learn more about the product he and other legislators are debating. News 10's Isabella Quintanilla was there. Isabella?
Yes, that's right, Lauren and Gordon. The day after SB 3 was vetoed, I talked with Texas House Representative Pat Curry, who said he wanted to meet with his constituents about THC and learn more about it before making decisions on how to regulate it. Today, he stuck to that, meeting with the owner of the Gas Shack dispensary in Waco.
How you doing, sir? Hi, guys.
Coming into today's visit, Representative Pat Curry says, frankly, he didn't know much about the THC business in Texas.
I'm still no expert on it, but the only way you're going to be effective as a legislator is to go learn as much as you can about it.
Which is what he did today, asking local dispensary owner Zach Metz all kinds of questions, from where their products come from, how they are tested, to what the current regulations are.
So what does 0.3% by weight mean to you?
So whenever
See, even he doesn't, he's trying to wrap his head around it. Sorry to kind of cut in there. I don't know what the fuck's going on with my video here. But why is it narrowed like that? That's interesting. Whatever. Just goes to show you that even other people are having trouble understanding it. I'll continue the clip here.
you're reading a COA or certificate of analysis, you're going to be looking for delta 9 THC, and on that dry weight basis of a percentage, you want it under or at 0.3%. That is what we're regulated on.
Met says he was excited to meet Curry, getting the opportunity to answer the representative's questions and ask his own questions.
I think we were both able to get a clear understanding on just an educational basis on how we're regulated, what we do as a shop, kind of talk with them on the upcoming legislative regulations coming up in the special session and things of that nature.
After their discussion, Representative Curry says he now has a better understanding of what lawmakers need to figure out in the upcoming special session.
The whole thing comes down to what are the right regulations and how do you do it and not kill an industry while you still can protect the rights of adults and protect Texas business and do the right thing.
Sharing that it won't be easy, but that he feels more confident after seeing a dispensary business like the Gas Shack.
I'd say the key takeaways is that you have people in this industry that understand the situation and understand the differences as to what's out there and are going to should be helpful in trying to come up with proper regulation.
All right. So I thought that was certainly interesting to see a representative actually take the time to go and see these shops, wrap their head around how these shops work. I remember there was a viral clip a while ago where Dan Patrick went to one of these shops, and one of his contentions, which I think is valid. These shops, because they are descheduled commodities, essentially. There are no regulations on. There's no age gate, and if you're not familiar with what an age gate is, it's what prevents people that are under 21 from purchasing alcohol or tobacco products. And similarly, it's a method that is employed at state legal dispensaries across the nation. So there are age gates to prevent people that are under 21 from accessing. There are exceptions, of course, with medical cards, where, like, at least in my home state of Illinois, you can become a medical cannabis patient under the age of 21, I believe, with, obviously a relationship with your physician and maybe something to do with your parent or legal guardian. I don't know. It's unclear to me. Maybe that's actually for people that are under 18. But the point is people under 21, people under 18 can get their cards in the state of Illinois, and from what I understand in other states. Just not exactly familiar with what that process entails. So, like I say, it's just interesting to me because here in the state of Illinois, the frame or the lens that this topic is presented with is typically how this system undercuts the established licensees and makes it nearly impossible for them to compete. Whereas in Texas, most of the arguments against a system like this, we did see earlier this clip, which basically said that Teacup, the compassionate use program, would essentially be worthless, and that's why licenses haven't expanded yet. So it's a similar argument here.
The Teacup program, he signed that bill. That's worthless now. Here we passed maybe the best Teacup program, Texas for compassionate use, to address those with PTSD, cancer, Crohn's disease, we added. Who's going to go there now when they can go to any smoke shop and get what they want? That's why no one grew their licenses before.
Right. So that's a similar argument to what we hear in states like Illinois, where it's like, these people pay a bunch for these licenses and they've got all of these different regulatory hurdles. Why would they implement those licenses if somebody can just get a hemp license and open up a corner store and not have to jump through all of those hoops that they had to? And I think it's an interesting argument. And I actually read an article, or I think it was actually just a tweet on Twitter, an interesting idea, and I'll try to get back to that. But the one thing that always kind of deflates that argument from my perspective is the idea that there's nothing stopping them from getting in hemp, like nothing. And that's what this seems to be. That's what this debate really seems to be about: open licensing versus limited licensing. Um, it would seem, from my perspective, that nobody disagrees that these products should be labeled accurately. They should be tested, which gets you that label that should be accurate. And third, and perhaps one of the most talked about facets of this debate, third, there should be an age gate. That's what they call the three-pillar approach. It's employed within the state legal marijuana industries across the state. For the most part, we did just have somebody from Maine where testing is not required. So there are some exceptions to that, but by and large, when cannabis is sold under a state legal program, it's usually uh, mandatory testing, mandatory labeling, and age gating, which seems to be concepts that everybody agrees on. I think the fourth point where people disagree on is the idea of allowing anybody and everybody to get a license and kind of participate in the free spirit of business. I think I meant to say the free spirit of capitalism. Um, so that really, from my perspective, seems to be what this debate is about. I've not seen anybody, I'm not aware of any proponents of, non-age gated cannabis. I'm not aware of any proponents of, they say that synthetic products. And I don't know. I think that narrative is sort of a slippery slope because as a cannabis consumer, when I go into these dispensaries and I see products, I say dispensaries, I meant to say like smoke shops or gas stations. When I take a look at their selection of hemp, I look at it and I go, I'm not consuming that. There are occasions where I look at something and I go, I'm consuming that. Like I'm gonna try that out. But by and large, I think that when you kind of pitch this as an issue of like, oh, these crazy, scary synthetic products, like I don't know any cannabis consumers that are purchasing those. I'm not aware of it being a thing. And frankly, discernment is what we've been taught as cannabis consumers because I don't mean to speak for everybody, but at least for most of my life, cannabis has been illegal. And as a result, I've had to learn how to discern quality from bunk. And there have been plenty of times where I've had to just say, like, hey, I'm not getting that. Or maybe I got something and I'm like, I'm never getting that again. And, it's kind of like the process we go through when we purchase any product. We kind of determine what is quality and what is not. So, um, yeah, very, very interesting debate. Like I say, I think it's interesting to see the differences in how it's framed in a state like Texas, where it's essentially reefer madness is alive and well. There's, like I said, there was that passing mention of how it makes a teacup license worthless, but it doesn't seem like that's the focus of this debate. And I don't know if that's because it's pretty well recognized that it's politically unpopular to basically vouch for a limited license market that essentially continues the criminalization of cannabis because the criminal law by and large remains the primary enforcement mechanism versus like other businesses where you would receive a business infraction for operating without a license. Anything to do with cannabis, you still go to jail, which has become, I would say, politically unpopular. So I mentioned that there was an idea that I thought was interesting, and I saw this on Twitter. I wish I could give credit where credit is due. If I can go and find the tweet later, I will try to. But to the people, and look, admittedly, I just thought this was an interesting idea. I'm not saying it's the end all be all. I'm not saying it's the magic wand solution. But you hear from these people in the state legal marijuana industries, and they're like, "Hey, I've had to pay $225,000 a year for my cultivation license for the last 10 years." That's a line I've heard from Illinois. And it's like, from their perspective, they think it's crazy that somebody can buy like a $200 hemp license and then start growing cannabis and selling products on the shelves when they have had to pay $225,000 a year just for licensing on their cultivation center. And that does sound outrageous. One of the ideas I found on Twitter, I saw on Twitter, was the idea of basically those licensees working with the state to basically give them, for lack of better words, a rebate, a refund, or a tax credit. In other words, like total up all that money that you've spent that all of these new licensees will not have to spend because, by the way, having to spend $225,000 a year for licensing is freaking ridiculous. Like, and just because you had to pay for it, why would you vouch for that? Like, you're literally complaining on one hand about that $225,000 fee, but then on the other hand, you're saying, well, everybody should have to pay that because I did. And it's like, no, how about you were wronged and that was wrong? And we can correct those wrongs by giving you, like I say, some sort of tax write off, rebate, whatever, where it's like you go through and you total what you've paid the state over the last 5 to 10 years. And they basically give you the ability to write that off in your taxes or use that as a credit because it's like, yeah, if you're saying that these new if it's unfair that these new licensees don't have to pay that, well, then maybe we kind of sort of give you back that money because it wasn't right that you had to pay all that money in the first place. So just reading some comments that are rolling in. Genetic Memory Farm says, and that is where we go wrong. Capitalism is an illusion of freedom of choice. Choosing between Pepsi and Coke, McDonald's or Burger King is not a choice. It's all poison. Poison. Your freedom is profitable. Yeah, yeah. And that's where I think, I said earlier, this debate is largely around limited licensing. There is a form of license limitation that I am supportive of that we actually have within the state of Illinois, and that is ownership limitations. And the idea behind that, the hope behind that, it's hard. We'll get into this in a second, but let me just lay out the hope behind those ownership limitations. It would be that nobody becomes or has a footprint any larger than anybody else, right? So in Illinois, we allow you to have maximum 10 dispensaries, maximum 3 cultivation centers. And the idea is that you could become just as big as anyone else. In other words, your market share, the amount of market share that you could take up is sort of capped. And like I say, it's the idea that everybody at their maximum potential would have the same footprint. Now, where that falls apart in states like Illinois is that there's no real way to like audit that. You kind of just have to trust that the regulators are keeping that in check. They don't publish any licensing information. And I believe that's true in Texas as well, where you can't, even if you submit a freedom of information request, you can't, they will not give you who the individuals are behind that license so that like you could check yourself, like, does this person have ties to this licensee and so on and so forth. You kind of just, in states like Illinois and I believe Texas, you kind of just have to trust that the regulators are regulating. I don't know that Texas has ownership limitations like Illinois does. But from what I understand, other states have implemented ownership limitations, and I think those are okay. I think license caps at a state level are ridiculous. People will say, even the Illinois Cannabis Regulation Oversight Officer has said that they believe that license limitations keep prices from falling too low and keep people out of receivership. Well, first of all, we've seen people go, I think, if I recall correctly, I mean, I've heard the word on the street is that Illinois licensees have gone into receivership. They've had to sell things off. Actually, I don't even know if that's, I think it was Forefront or Acreage. There have been pretty big companies that have gone into receivership, and they're not only in Illinois, but anyways, if you're going to say that license limitations prevent people from going out of business, I think the evidence is to the contrary on that. If you're going to say that license limitations prevent prices from getting too low, I think that's not inaccurate. Prices in Illinois are extremely expensive and have steadily been expensive. So I think there's some validity to that. I would just say what why do we care about prices getting too low in cannabis? Why do we care about people going into receivership? Like, we all accept the fact that 80% of restaurants go out of business within the first 5 years. I'll have somebody that knows a little bit more than me on some of these topics to discuss that in the future, and they have a really interesting take on that exact question that I just asked. But I'm curious what you think. Why is cannabis any different? Why should we limit people from legally participating in the system and arresting anybody who basically are functioning as, you might call them, unlicensed entrepreneurs? I just think it's a crazy double standard in which the criminalization of cannabis is perpetuated, and it's a direct result of a system like the one we're talking about. So, um, look, I should say that I'm okay with localities limiting licenses. I think I'm okay with that just based on what I hear and what I've seen. Like, I've gone to local municipality meetings and I've seen local townships limit bars and restaurants and even smoke shops. That's okay, I guess, if you want to control what's in your community and you'd rather not have certain things in your community, or if you'd rather only have a limited number of those certain things in your community. It seems like we've kind of established that that is absolutely your right. And I'm okay with that. But when you set it at the state level, I think that's where it starts to get a little bit too big government. And especially, like, if it was that the criminal law wasn't the primary enforcement mechanism, I think I might feel a little bit differently about this. But the idea that we legalize, and I'm talking about from my perspective in Illinois, if we legalized cannabis based on the idea of righting the wrongs of the war on drugs, my question has been, well, then why do we continue the war on drugs for everybody that operates outside of that limited license system? Genetic Memory Farms says, I think we're missing the bigger picture here. Without an individual right to home grow unfettered, the concern for businesses and their ability to profit is putting the cart before the horse. And I actually tend to agree with you. I just had a couple of prohibitionists on the show, one of which I did debate and I have debated in the past. The other one, I just kind of let her talk about what she believes in and such, which was fun. But yeah, the main point that I tried to make, in fact, is actually that I don't think, like, honestly, I would be okay if there wasn't an industry. I know that's going to get me some hate on, definitely on Twitter, but that's just par for the course at this point. I have always said that cannabis is not legal. I shouldn't say I've always said. Somebody said it, and then I started saying it. I think his name was Vintage Buds, and he's been on the podcast in the past. I've always loved the saying ever since I heard it that cannabis is not legal until you can possess, use, cultivate, gift as much as you want, need, or please. I would extend that point to say you should also be able to buy as much as you please. You should be able to sell as much as you please. But to Genetic Memory Farm's point, business priorities should never be given preference in law over individuals' freedom. That's what I think the cannabis issue is about. And to bring it back to the podcast that I had with people that don't believe cannabis should be legal, I have my middle ground to that, because they say, well, in industry, they just go for profits. They don't care about the people that actually purchase their product. And it's like, all right. I'm not a huge advocate for the industry. Am I okay with an industry? Sure. Is it cool to be able to go to a dispensary and buy product? Sure. But at the core of my beliefs, I just believe you should be able to cultivate, use, and possess this product. Like, I think that's very simple. And some people will tell me, well, Cole, it's all about incremental approaches. And it's like, yeah, I guess I understand that. But in 1937, when we just completely made cannabis illegal and ultimately ended up adding it to the Controlled Substances Act, was that an incremental approach? That seemed pretty fast. That seemed like it was like pretty well. One day it was legal and decriminalized, and the next day it was a controlled substance. It's funny how, we can take steps backwards, and that doesn't have to be incremental, but any step forward, it's got to be baby steps. And look, I get it. I'm not knocking incrementalism. It's frustrating, but I get it. I'm just saying. It's pretty simple. I value access, and I think access starts with the ability to grow all you want at home, and access could be extended by allowing people to, purchase or sell their homegrown cannabis in a store. And, if we want to allow businesses to function, I'm not opposed to that either. But if you're asking me, my number one priority, it's just to allow people to use, cultivate, and possess the cannabis plant. And I'll extend it to mushrooms and other things. But that's for another episode. Folks, I hope you found value in this episode. Went a little bit longer than I expected it to. Austin from txcanico.com. Thank you so much for joining me on this show. I appreciated your time. And be sure to go over to txcanico.com, follow them on social media, give them your support. They are fighting the good fight. They've worked to decriminalize cannabis in multiple cities across the state of Texas, which I think was awesome. In some places in Texas, they had a larger possession limit than we did in Illinois. I think it was like 3 ounces or something like that. It's like, hell yeah, Texas, do it big. So, yeah, I had a good time today. I hope you all did too. If you haven't smashed that like button yet, please do it. If you've not subscribed to my channel yet, please do it. We'll have Austin back on in the future. And again, really, the way that I'm approaching this issue can be summarized if you check out my mini documentary. I always like to bring up the mini documentary. Folks, I think that project that I did really comes up with, it really puts everything I believe on this subject sort of in a bottle in just about an hour. So if you watch it at 2 times speed, you can have my mini documentary completed in 30 minutes. And you can check that out at colememo.com/minidoc. Here is a peek at what you can expect. Folks, happy Sunday. Take care.
Beginning January 1st, 2020, the recreational use of cannabis will be legal in the state of Illinois.
Available to stream now, my mini doc dives into the history of Illinois legalization, starting with
January 1st. What should we expect? The biggest thing that we need people to understand is that January 1, in terms of the criminal justice system here in this state, is the end of prohibition.
See how Illinois missed its chance at real cannabis reform with key failures, including the fact that
the program includes regulation on possession limits.
So people can still be arrested for a possession.
And I want to highlight that in its first year of legalized recreational marijuana in the state of Illinois, they arrested 3 times as many black people for possession than any other race.
We've run into so much cannabis, we've run out of places to put it.
I have represented people and taken their cases through the court system who got charged with more serious crimes only because the police said that they smelled cannabis. And not because the police said you have illegal cannabis, or not because you have too much cannabis, or not because you're high on cannabis, but because I can smell it and that's it.
Attorney goes, he understands that he can't be smoking and his cannabis flower shouldn't be open. And I was like, I'd like to say for the record that I was not smoking and my flower was not open.
So that's where we're at right now in Illinois.
Yeah.
And I hope it changes.
Start watching now at colememo.com/minidoc.